Good evening, it's June 1st, 2025, Sunday.
This Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday.
Oh boy.
Time keeps rolling on, doesn't it?
Yeah, lose track of it.
You say you blinked at 20 and now you're 100, yeah. It's June 1st, 2025, and I'm in Studio 6A with Mr. John J. Jeckovich, and we're reading his books titled Their Mother's Sons. Their Mother's Sons. Mr. Jeckovich, how many pages is this book?
849.
Yeah. I know you didn't use Google, and I know you didn't use a laptop to write it. How'd you write this book?
Yellow pages.
Yeah.
By hand, and then typed it out.
Yeah. It's a good book. You're having a nice day today. I see you're all wearing gray.
Oh, Ray?
Yeah. You got new clothes on again. Every day, I don't think you wash. I think every day you just buy new clothes.
No.
You got new clothes every day.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I do. I do. So you're looking well. Did you have a good dinner?
Huh?
Did you have a good dinner?
Yeah.
Good breakfast?
Breakfast was good, yeah.
I heard you had a big turnout yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
I heard you had 5 generations came to see you yesterday.
Yeah, yeah.
Wasn't that nice?
Yeah.
Did you see your great-granddaughter, Hailey Jeckovich, the little baby? Wasn't that nice to see?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And did you see the little boy that's 2 years old that's named Jeckovich?
Yeah.
Wasn't he tearing everything up?
Oh, yeah.
And look at the 2 boys, Brantley and Brooks. Weren't they doing a fine job?
Yeah, they getting everything.
Yeah, but didn't they do a nice job in recording?
Yeah. He was asking me all kinds of questions.
They're smart. And he wrote that, and Brantley wrote that story about you during your service.
Yeah.
And he wrote that story about you in your service.
He's been hanging on to me.
And it was very nice. It was very nice. And he took that to school and he read all about you in that service. Is all the mics working?
Yeah.
Okay. So today, Mr. Jeckovich is from Company H, the 2nd Battalion of the 291st Regiment of the 75th Infantry Division of the U.S. Army during World War II. Mr. Jeckovich at that time was affectionately referred to his division as the Diaper Division. How come?
They're all 33s.
Yeah, 33 is a code. Is the code for teenagers.
19.
19, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Jeckovich lives by the motto, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift.
Right.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm going to pick up, we're the second time around on your book, Mr. Jeckovich, and I'm going to pick up on chapter 6, which is Home on Furlough, Farewell to Anne. Just an update on this chapter. You're dating a beautiful lady named Anne Mahaney, teenager in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is a stone's throw from your base, Breckenridge. And you're seeing her for many months. You met her mother, and everything's going really nice. And then you're called in to get on the troop ship and go overseas.
Yeah, shipped over there.
How was that troop ship? What was that like?
It was an old luxury liner. They converted to a troop ship.
And what was the sleeping arrangements like?
Triple.
Triple what?
Triple cots up.
Oh, very close to the ceiling?
Yeah.
How was the food?
Food was good, bad because it was limey ship.
Okay, it was a limey ship. You mean an English ship?
Yeah.
And they don't cook to your standards. How do they cook?
Greasy.
Greasy, yeah. So you got on that ship, you said goodbye to Anne Mahaney, and he said, Anne, I'll call you soon.
Never did.
Well, you did.
Last couple of weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, it was 80 years later you called her.
Yeah.
80 years, you kept your promise, but 80 years later, and the ironic twist of the story is she answered the phone.
Yeah, she answered the phone.
80 years later.
She's waiting for the phone call.
I don't know about about that.
Oh,
But
boy.
80 years
That's a
later,
lot of
how does
faith.
she sound? She's in her 90s now.
Oh, feeble now, feeble.
So
Yeah.
you have a beautiful picture of her when she's a teenager on your office wall for 80 years.
Yeah.
She looked beautiful, like a young Marilyn Monroe. She's a small, tiny, beautiful young girl. And now you call her and she's in her 90s. Tell us how that conversation went.
Well, I took the pictures out, put my mother up.
Okay, so on your office wall, you had this beautiful young girl, Anne Mahaney, on your wall, and then after that conversation, you removed her picture. What'd you do with it?
Put it in, wrapped it up in the towel, put it in the closet.
Okay, and then you put your mother's picture up.
Yeah.
So that's where the book comes from again. Their mother's sons.
Yeah. All goes
Their
right
mother's
around.
sons.
Yeah.
And you had another beautiful girlfriend named Renee.
Renee.
Renee was in a convent. She was a nun, a beautiful young lady. There again,
Yeah.
early 20s. And this is when the Nazis occupied Paris.
For
in
5
France.
years, 4 years.
Yeah, for 4 miserable years. And you and many of your division ran the Nazis' asses out, kicked their asses out. But the story keeps going. So she's a nun, a Roman Catholic nun, and she got a notification from her mother superior that her mother and father, which they were in the 40s, were just tortured and killed by the Nazis.
Yeah.
It didn't go well. She was very upset. And then a few months later, she got the notification that her 2 teenage brothers,
Yeah.
by Mother Superior, told her that they were just also tortured and killed by the Nazis. So, then what happened next? What did Renee do?
Well, she dissolved her faith and went into the resistance.
She questioned her Roman Catholic faith, which even a pope questions his faith at times. Her mother and father in their 40s are destroyed and tortured by the Nazis. Then her young teenage brothers, both of them were killed and tortured by the Nazis. And here she is. She was a cloistered nun, and the only thing she was doing was praying for mankind, praying for a reparation of sins of mankind. That's all she was doing. So she probably said, Lord, what's going on here? I'm praying 7 days a week, 24 hours a day almost.
Yeah.
You got my mother and father tortured and killed like dogs. Now you torture and have them, the Nazis torture and kill my teenage brothers, like 13 and 14? What the hell's going on? So she left the convent, and what did she do from there?
Went into resistance.
Yeah, she joined the French resistance. But what was Renee's great talent?
What was the great talent?
Artist.
She was taking in top line German officers and drawing their face pictures. She's a good artist.
She was a great artist.
And the German authorities come in and talk about how great they're doing. And they leak a lot of information, and she was passing on that information to the Allies.
So Renee was a great artist besides being a nun, and while the Germans were occupying France, she set up the studio where the SS and the top brass from the Nazi army would come in and get their pictures painted.
Yeah.
Their faces painted, their portraits painted, and they were always bragging amongst each other.
And
that's how these guys, usually generally the officers, have great big egos, and they didn't stroke daily. And she was joined the French resistance. Former nun, now she's in the French resistance, and she passed the information down to the 40s in the French resistance. Have you ever went down to the French resistance headquarters?
Down in the sewer someplace.
It's in the sewer.
Yeah.
The sewer of Paris.
Yeah.
How was it?
The stunky.
Yeah.
Well, the bottom of the line.
So finally the SS got wise that she was passing out information. What happened to her?
Well, they took her out in the field and shot her.
Took her out in the field and shot her. That was the end of it.
Yeah.
A beautiful 22-year-old nun.
Yeah.
Blew her brains out. What a war.
Yeah.
What a miserable, stinking war.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know about Anne Mahaney. We called her in Owensboro, Kentucky. We know what unfortunately happened to Renee, and God rest her soul. God rest her soul. Now the third girlfriend you had during World War II was called Jean Rowan Young, and she was in Wales and Haverford West, correct?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Gene.
Well, we were friendly. We got to talk to her. I was in London for over a year,
And tell us how.
and we could move back and forth and everything.
Well,
And then all of a sudden she disappeared.
Tell us how you ordered her house. You brought her the food from the base.
Yeah, we took breaks. We went to the chef. Got stuff from the Army hospital, Army warehouse, and got food to them.
And was the family happy?
Oh yeah, well, in wartime for 5 years they didn't get that stuff. Everything was gone.
And what did Gene's father do in Haverford West?
He was a mayor.
Mayor. And many times when you and Gene went on dates at night, what did you see flying overhead?
Spitfires.
Explain to someone that has not seen a Spitfire flying low. What does it look like?
And it was shooting the flames out of the back end.
Very loud.
Yeah, they were going over bombing Germany.
It was 24/7.
Yeah,
They were bombing Germany, turning Germany into complete rubble.
yeah.
Complete rubble. You might see 100 Spitfires go across daily,
Yeah,
and maybe 30 came back.
a little more than that.
A little more than that.
Yeah,
They got shot down.
yeah.
And it was pretty crude conditions. In a Spitfire, you basically had to be a small person to fit.
Yeah, they gotta get out with a wrench to get them out.
Yeah, they're locked in there.
They're real close.
Yeah, real close quarters. What kind of engines were they running in there?
Rolls Royce.
Rolls Royce. And they're still running Rolls Royce engines
Yeah.
today. Yeah. So, getting back to Gene Roller Young, oh boy, we sent by, I don't know, over a couple months, several private investigators we hired to find her. They came up with zero. Absolute zero. So then with her connections, we had the Daily Mail, which has a circulation of about 1 million newspapers a day. We had them write a full-page story about Mr. Jeckovich in the Daily Mail. 1 million plus circulation. We came up zero.
Yeah.
We came up zero. We haven't given up yet. We're going to find Gene Roland Young or her family, but we have to hire more investigators to find out, because we're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to find out what happened to her, and later down the road, we'll report it to you what finally happened. Yeah. But what was the streets like in Haverford West?
Streets?
Yeah, what was the streets and houses like?
They're quite, they're close together. It was a farm town.
Yeah. One thing good came out of this full-page story we ran about Mr. Jeckovich in the Daily Mail. We came up with one young gentleman in his 20s or early 30s that is a full-time resident, a lifelong resident of London. He went to Paris and stood in front of the Eiffel Tower, and he talked for 15 minutes about thanking Mr. Jeckovich and the army for saving his countries.
Yeah.
And this was a fine young man. I can't think of any young people in the United States would even think that way. But this man stood in front of the Eiffel Tower for at least 15 minutes, and he said nothing but beautiful things about the U.S. Army and people like Mr. Jeckovich, combat fighters of World War II. If you go to our podcast, Bulge Busters, it's in there somewhere with the 600 podcast that they made. And the fact is known, and the fact is known that if it wasn't for the American U.S. Army, France and certainly England couldn't have won the war.
The Germans would have made it into them, yeah.
They couldn't have won the war.
Yeah.
They couldn't have won the war. They couldn't have done it with the Americans. And the American soldiers got involved right after Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. On that day, Canada entered the war. And then the next day, the United States entered the war. And there would be no France today. There'd be no United Kingdom today. Everyone would be speaking Germany, and it'd be a communistic country.
Yeah. Wow.
Perfectly. And even the high brass would admit that. So it wasn't, it's ironic, when Germany took over France, they thought it would take several months to do. France had more fighters, France had more equipment, Germany had less, and they had less soldiers. However, they took it over in like 2.5 weeks.
The French are very good fighters.
And French were good fighters.
Yeah.
They took it over in 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
When you're on the front lines fighting the Battle of Bulge and other wars, did you fight with many soldiers from France?
No, no.
Did you fight with many soldiers from the UK?
Yeah, I fought with some armies. I fought with some armies, yeah.
Limeys, is that what you call them? Limeys?
Yeah.
How about Canadian soldiers?
No, never seen a Canadian.
Okay, how about
They were in a
Russians?
different sector.
How about Russian soldiers?
No, in a different sector.
See, the Russian soldiers took the biggest hit.
Yeah,
lost-
they were good fighters.
yeah, they took the biggest hit.
Yeah.
They lost millions of people. And how about the Marines? Did you fight with Marines?
Marines in the Pacific, strictly the Pacific. Never came over to Europe.
So you never seen a Marine?
Yeah, that's why I say if you join the Marines, you're going to go to the Pacific.
When you got drafted, I know this is an interesting point, I don't know. When you got drafted, they sent you into the U.S. Army, the front line. If you got drafted, did the Marines draft?
Marines?
Yeah, did they draft? Or
No,
was it just the Army?
no, the Marines didn't draft. No.
Just the Army?
No, they just picked off the Army.
Okay, minutes, please. So that's an interesting fact.
Marines were strictly up the Pacific.
13.
Well, let's talk about your draft. Your two brothers during World War II, they enlisted, all right? Your older brother never seen the front line,
No.
never seen a weapon.
Well, he was in school, yeah.
But still, what was his job?
Teaching recruits how to drive Jeeps.
In the United States.
Yeah,
Pretty easy job.
yeah.
And was he some type of expert driver?
Yeah, he ran into the fire hydrant.
You did what?
Say that again.
He ran into the fire hydrant.
He ran into a fire hydrant, so he got put in the position of teaching young cadets how to drive Jeeps.
Yeah.
Sounds like the Army. Sounds like something they would do. And so, why didn't you enlist to take a cushy job like that?
Well, I stayed with my mother. My father passed away.
So here's how it plays out. Mr. Jeckovich's father died at 43, so he became the sole caretaker of his mother from 11
Yeah.
years old. And to her death when she was 89. And so he wanted to spend as much time caring for his mother,
Yeah,
so he waited till he got drafted.
yeah. I waited till they pulled me in. Yeah,
When they pulled you in.
Yeah.
And so you had a couple more months with your mother.
yeah.
But the trade-off was big. If you get drafted during World War II, you are going right to the front lines. You are
Well,
going
not
right to
necessarily.
camp.
It all depends what your titles are.
But what happened to you?
Huh?
What happened to you?
Well, that was the right position. They were needed men.
So you
that
went right
was
to the
right
front
after.
line.
That was right after D-Day. They needed the men.
But you went right-
The casualties were
Most
high.
of the men were killed, D-Day.
Yeah.
So you went right to the front line.
Yeah.
And during World War II,
Well, I was 33. I was 19. That's the age they wanted for combat.
yeah, that's a combat
That's
age is
combat
19,
age, 33.
And the code is 33. Let's just talk about that age factor for 1 minute. What would be the difference between a 19-year-old combat fighter and, let's just say, a 25-year-old combat?
He wouldn't have the stamina or the attitude.
So 25 is pretty much lost it by then.
Yeah.
Too old.
Well, he's got kids at home, family at home.
And 19's a fighter.
Responsibilities. 19-year-old. I didn't have. Well, I had my mother. That was all.
But
I didn't have a family. I wasn't married.
19's a fighting age.
Yeah.
How would a man of, say, 30, in his 30s do during World War II?
What?
How would a man of 30s do in World War
He
II?
wouldn't do very good. They find out about him. They pull him out.
They throw him out. He was
Yeah,
too
put him
old.
back in rear asphalt someplace.
Too old.
Yeah.
Stick him back on a typewriter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stick him back on a
They
typewriter.
wanted the 33s.
Yeah, that's the code. So, Mr. Jeckovich didn't leave World War II unscathed. Bullet in the shoulder by a sniper, trench foot, Frostbite,
Lost
a hip, hit by a dirty bomb. Tell us what a dirty bomb is.
Well, the Germans would put a artillery thing and put screwdrivers in, regular blades and everything else, and they shoot it over, and that would come down and somebody would take their head off or something. Yeah.
So the bomb would be a bomb in itself, which is dangerous.
Yeah.
But the evil Nazis, pure devastating evil, they would stick inside this bomb bolts, wrenches,
razor blades. Yeah.
So when it blew up over you guys in a foxhole, it did the most amount of damage everywhere.
Yeah. It took that Leap's head off.
Okay, let's talk about it. Donald Leap, you and him were in a foxhole. You were street smart. Donald Leap wasn't.
No, he wasn't street smart, no.
And you kept on telling Donald Leap to stay low.
Yeah,
what would he do?
Well, he kept popping his head up.
How would he do it?
Keep your head down, put your heads over your head.
How would he do it?
And I keep telling him, that he got caught.
But show us how he would do it.
Huh?
How would he do it? How would he be popping his head up?
I said, put your hands over your...
But show us an example with your head how he would do it.
Like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how would Donald Leap do it?
He'd get up, look up.
He'd look up.
Yeah. When you look, he'd pop his head up over.
Yeah. And so what happened then, Donald Leap was a fine person, died as a teenager. That same dirty bomb that hit Mr. Jeckovich in the foxhole took Donald Leap's head completely off. And the only thing left was hanging was his glasses. Mr. Jeckovich removed his glasses and one dog tag and sent a beautiful letter over to his mother and father. But you told him 100 times, lay low, stay low.
Yeah.
Maybe he was scared. Maybe that was the reason why.
No, he was just curious.
Curious. Didn't you tell me one time he started using his pistol?
Who did?
Donald Leap, did he use his pistol?
No, he never used a pistol. He was afraid of it.
So there's another young boy gone, no life, 19 years old. For what? For what? But the story continues. Donald Leap's younger brother, who was too young to serve in World War II, many years later when he retired, he lived 1 block away from Mr. Jeckovich in Florida. We didn't know though.
Yeah.
He lived there, Mr. Jeckovich, Donald Leap's younger brother, lived next to Mr. Jeckovich for 25 years, 1 block away. We didn't know until we received an obituary. Now that would have been nice if they knew, so they would respect Donald Leap and talk about him and converse. It just didn't happen. So the war is a cold and the war is a brutal thing. But getting back to Mr. Jeckovich and his division, they were respectively, and I underline this, they were respectively called the Diaper Division because of their age.
Yeah.
However, Mr. Jeckovich and his division had to hold Bastogne, horrible weather conditions. They couldn't get any air support for 4 or 5 days, and their orders were, under no circumstances do you leave that town of Bastogne. You can't leave it. Fight it to the bitter end.
That was the central point.
Central point.
Yeah.
And you were surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Nazis, 6,000 Nazi tanks, and you had no support because of the weather. They couldn't bring anybody in. Long story short, after 4 days, 97% of his division are gone. They're slaughtered.
Yeah.
He was one of the lucky 3%. The weather broke. And then they sent in thousands of paratroopers. And they sent in supplies.
Material and everything.
Material. Tens of thousands of troops by land.
Yeah.
Air support fighting. And it pushed all those Nazi bastards back to Germany. And that Battle of Bulge was Adolf Hitler's last-ditch effort. That was his last-ditch effort to do 2 things. Kill Americans at any expense and destroy property.
Yeah.
And he did both.
Yeah.
But after that point, when his last-ditch psychotic idea of the Battle of Bulge, Hitler then, a week later, committed suicide. Because he didn't want to be like Mussolini. Mussolini, another psychotic bastard from Italy, what happened to Mussolini Hitler didn't want to happen to him. They hung in a gas station Mussolini bare-ass naked alive.
Upside down.
And they beat the shit out of him until he died.
Yeah.
Hitler didn't want to go through that. So he took the coward's way out.
Yeah.
And he committed suicide. He committed suicide. And that was the end of him. Then the war was winding down. And
4 minutes.
the war was winding down. And now you guys are worried about being sent to the Pacific.
Well, it's Pacific.
Because the Pacific is raging on. The Pacific is in full-blown war mode.
Yeah.
And all you guys say, man, I made it through this war in Europe. Now if I go to the Pacific, I might not be so lucky.
No.
You didn't go.
No.
They didn't send you.
They dropped the bomb.
Okay, so what do you think of them dropping 2 atom bombs?
Well, they think it was a good thing.
Why is that?
Saved a lot of lives.
Yeah. And that ended the war.
Yeah.
Ironically, some of the Japanese were fierce fighters. 30 years after the war was over.
They were isolated someplace.
What's that?
They were isolated someplace.
They were isolated.
Yeah.
30 years after the war was open in the Pacific, 30 years in the 70s, they still found Japanese soldiers thinking the war was still on.
Yeah.
Out of everyone in Europe, every tens and hundreds of thousands of fighters, they didn't want to go to the Pacific, right?
Yeah.
There was one man that did want to go.
Patton.
Patton.
He was a go-getter.
He couldn't wait to get to Pacific.
Yeah, he was fighting with eyes out all the time.
General Patton was also in World War I, and he was in World War II, and many wars in between.
Yeah.
It's ironic, you never know how your end will come. He died from his injuries from a civilian automobile accident.
Yeah.
And that was it, you never know.
No, he had a concussion, and they didn't take care of the concussion.
Yeah.
He got,
All this battle and all this misery he's seen. Yeah. And he went that way. It's hard to believe. You never know how your end will come.
yeah.
You never know. Only thing we know for sure is you came into this world with nothing, and you'll leave with nothing. It's just going to be that simple. Minutes, please.
Two and a half.
So, Mr. Jeckovich's mind is a library. He's done many things, wrote a book, who had many positions. So if anyone has any questions for Mr. Jeckovich, text them at 407-366-0000. Text Mr. Jeckovich any questions at 407-366-0000. Mr. Jeckovich has answered hundreds and hundreds of questions already, everything from A to Z. Even if you have a question about marriage, ask him. Give us an example.
I
How many years were you married?
69 years.
69 years, so I guess he'd be an expert at that.
Yeah.
I guess he'd be an expert at that. Minutes?
Minute 40.
So we got many questions that always come through. We're short on time, but the number one question is, Mr. Jeckovich, where can I buy your book and how much?
It's not for sale.
It's not for sale. It never will be for sale. There's the original copy in the World War II Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. But it's not about money. Mr. Jeckovich certainly doesn't need any money. He's very well off. But the book is about giving younger generation a better example how to live their life. You know, how to do things simpler and not harder, and learn from Mr. Jeckovich's stories and examples, right? And that's why the book was written, right?
Yeah.
So people can learn. And then we'll go in more detail of that tomorrow. But the book has never, ever been about money. But you can listen to the whole book for free. Mr. Jeckovich has got over 600 podcasts on Google. Bulge Busters, John Jeckovich. You can listen from chapter 1 to the last chapter, all for free.
Yeah.
Listen to all the words. You can see him talking them. And now we're going the second time around of the book, and we're doing the second time on chapter 6.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And he loves getting all the wonderful comments.
And you get tons and tons and tons of wonderful comments. People that knew you 60 years ago.
They're sending gifts.
Oh yes, you received so
Yeah, I
many
got
gifts.
a leather jacket once.
Hats.
hats,
You got all kinds of
Blankets,
blankets, Mexican blankets,
shirts, boots.
boots.
yeah.
You got gifts from all around the world.
Yeah.
Thank
He's
you
even
very
got
much.
gifts from
Netherlands,
Australia.
from Netherlands.